Hi everybody, Adrian Fuentes here. Did you know that the Democrats of Greater Tucson has a website, thedgt.org, and if you subscribe, it's only 20 bucks. You can support this great weekly communication where folks get together. Sometimes there's candidates, sometimes folks like me pop on to help understand what's going on in the world. The Democrats of Greater Tucson, thedgt.org. Join up today.
And welcome, Judge Charlene Pesquiera.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, we really enjoy having you. You're a native of Tucson, serving her community for over 30 years. She has dedicated herself to helping individuals with substance abuse, domestic violence, and mental health issues. She is also the co-owner of the National Institute of Contract Management, LLC, where she specialized in contract management for businesses and not-profits. Charlene was a criminal justice adjunct professor instructing criminal justice courses. She is also a 15-time marathon runner. You don't see that every day, Charlene. That's pretty cool. Served since 2017. She has been the Justice of the Peace for County Consolidated Justice Court, Precinct 4. She received a master's degree in business administration from the University of Phoenix, received a pre-law and criminal justice degree from Prescott College, and received an associate degree in criminal justice and corrections from Pima Community College. She was elected in 2023 by her colleagues to serve as the presiding judge of the court. She was appointed administrative judge, chief administrative judge, in 2020 by the Honorable Kyle Bryson. She provided over homeless court since 2017, served as Arizona State Senator in 2007 to 2009, where she proudly sponsored and passed successful legislation to protect our state. Since Judge Pesquiera has served as elected Justice of the Peace, she implemented an online program so that individuals can have their criminal convictions set aside without legal representation or cost. This was a measure to access justice that was supported by the former Chief Justice, Scott Bales, of the Arizona Supreme Court. So let's give Judge Pesquiera a warm Democrats of Greater Tucson welcome. Judge Pesquiera, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you, members, for being present here today. My name is Charlene Pesquiera, and I'm running for re-election for Justice of the Peace, Precinct 4, which encompasses the west side of Tucson. I'm going to share a little bit about myself on a personal note. I was born in Los Angeles, and at the age of 9, my parents moved to Tucson because of my asthma condition. My father, who was born in Tucson, thought at the time that the warmer climate would help my asthma. So my parents moved my siblings and I to Tucson. If anyone is familiar with asthma, in the 60s, asthma was still being researched and explored. So the doctors would often tell my parents, make sure you limit Charlene's activity. So at the age of 12, I decided to challenge what that meant, and I started running. At the age of 40, I ran my first marathon. And as you heard in my introduction, I've been running ever since. I plan on running my next marathon at the end of this year. So hopefully that'll be my 16th marathon. I have one adult son whom I'm very proud of, and I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. I have a partner who most of you know, who I coincidentally met at a DGT meeting. So I'm going to say thank you, DGT. A little bit about my values. My parents always encouraged and valued education, integrity, and hard work. This ongoing theme in my household was always present. I was told never give up and don't settle for the status quo. In fact, my parents said to me, if something is wrong, find your voice and do something about it. I've always respected those lessons and stand by those values till this day. Touching on my education, I know it was touched on a little bit here, and I'm happy to say that I've attended college here in Tucson and Prescott College. I have an associate's degree in criminal justice and corrections from Pima Community College, a bachelor's degree in pre-law and criminal justice with Prescott College, and a master's degree in business administration from the University of Phoenix. In 2007, I served as an Arizona state senator, which was in the northwest side of Tucson, and was the first Democrat to be elected as a state senator in that district. I proudly served on committees for higher education, government, and education K through 12. I also had the opportunity to serve on a special committee serving veterans. I served one term and successfully sponsored legislation on crimes against children and accomplice liability. In 2017, I was elected to serve as Justice of the Peace for the Pima County Courts, where I am serving now my second term. Since my term as Justice of the Peace, I was appointed to Chief Administrative Judge by the Honorable Kyle Bryson of Superior Court. I was also elected by my peers to serve as the presiding judge of the Pima County Courts in 2023, where I managed the Tucson, Green Valley, and Ajo courts. I've always believed that serving my community was important. So in doing so, I've served on several boards. I currently serve as a board member for the Parent-Student Prison Initiative Program. This is a nonprofit that helps relationships between youth and parents, for parents that are tried as adults in the system. I served as a board member for the Justice of Peace Association and served on the City of Tucson Homeless Court Coalition Committee. I served as a board member for the Tucson Mountain Associations, served as a board member for Dancing in the Streets Arizona, a nonprofit for youth active in ballet, and served as a board member for the Primavera Foundation. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my work experience and some insights that I've had throughout my career. I have a diverse background that led me to be a Justice of the Peace of where I am today. I have over 30 years of experience in the criminal justice field, working in the areas of mental health, substance abuse, and domestic violence. I worked with agencies such as La Frontera, Hino, Samhac, and Amity Drug Rehab. In fact, my first professional job I will share with you was at the Arizona State Prison at the age of 21. At 21, I was tasked as a caseworker to work with youth that tried as adults. And from there, I was transferred over to work with the adult unit of the prison, where I implemented a domestic violence and substance abuse program. I served as director of diversion for juveniles with the Volunteer Center of Tucson and the Juvenile Court. I worked as a program manager on a Cuban grant with Vision Quest for inmates released from prison. In my career, I had an interest in grant writing, which led me to serve the rural communities as an associate director for Adelante Juntos. This is a nonprofit organization. And at the time, I'll share with you, when I was going through the interview process, I was told you can have the job, but by the end of the year, you may have to lay off some people. And by the way, your grants resources are depleting. Well, because I like a challenge, I took on the job in that role. And I'm proud to say, within 1 year, I brought in $3 million in grants. I managed to secure a building based on a proposal that I submitted. So then now the agency had a stable facility to provide services for the rural community. And I'm also happy to report I didn't have to lay anybody off. So that was a very interesting and wonderful experience I had with the rural community. I was an adjunct professor. I taught criminal justice, business law, contract law, and computer forensics. I was a paralegal intern at the Legal Defender's Office, working with Frank Dolly, who later served as a Superior Court judge. I worked as a contract paralegal on the Exxon Valdez case with a law firm in Washington State in partnership with the Environmental Protection Agency. I was co-owner of a small business, the National Institute of Contract Management, where I consulted with engineering, technology, and construction companies, negotiating contracts and procurement. With this diverse background, education, and having served as a state senator, I believe, ironically, prepared me for the path of where I am today. My predecessor, that some of you may know, Judge Carmen Dolny, decided to retire and asked me if I was still interested in running for Justice of the Peace. She knew I've always had an interest, but running against her just wasn't an option for me. So when Judge Dolny retired, I stepped up and ran, and here I am today. I'm going to go over a little bit about what is a Justice of the Peace. A Justice of the Peace requires the experience of someone who has a diverse background, and I'll tell you why. A person should have knowledge of the law, the ability to effectively manage a caseload for both criminal and civil cases. A Justice of the Peace will preside over bench trials, jury trials, evidentiary hearings, small claims under $10,000, garnishments, default hearings, and eviction cases. A judicial demeanor that is unbiased and done so with fairness. The ability to preside over felony preliminary hearings may also be heard by a Justice of the Peace. I have heard some very serious felony matters relating to assault, drug, and rape at the preliminary level. As a Justice of the Peace, you preside over orders of protection and injunctions. Arraignments is another function of the job where you advise someone of their constitutional rights and their charges. This is when someone first appears before the court. Since the majority of our cases are civil matters, a comprehension of contract law is relevant to the job. There are thousands of civil filings, and as a Justice of the Peace, you need to review these cases daily and timely because of the time standards that are involved with these civil cases. As a Justice of the Peace, you are also considering testimony of various types of witnesses. It is important to have the skills to determine if someone is a credible witness. I actually had one case where I identified a law enforcement officer who lost credibility with the court because of his contradictions during his testimony. Now, this does not reflect all law enforcement officers, but this is one example that I've had. I want to talk a little bit about what you need to consider when you're voting for a Justice of the Peace. I gave you a very elaborate description of some of the duties because I feel it's important. Often I've been to events where I hear maybe 4 or 5 bullets of what a Justice of the Peace does, but there's a lot more, as I just went over with you, that goes on a daily basis. And that's important. It's important work. As a judge, I cannot say someone is guilty before knowing the facts, nor can I make comments to a panel of jurors to sway them. This would be prejudicial. That's not what you want in a judge. Someone making reckless comments on the bench with no regard to the law, or someone who demonstrates a bias on the bench. To that point, I want to respond to some of the vague comments my opponent made last week. My opponent recklessly made vague accusations that I was possibly in trouble with the Judicial Conduct Commission. I can confirm here today, I have not violated any laws or rules or acted in any manner that would constitute any action against me as a judge by the commission. By making these reckless accusations, my opponent violated Rule 4.3A and the rules of judicial conduct by recklessly making those untrue accusations. I also want to point out that during this campaign, my opponent violated Rule 4.1, A3, and 5 of the judicial conduct rules by passing petitions for another candidate, which a judge or a judicial candidate is not permitted to do. Someone who dismisses the rules or cannot demonstrate a judicial demeanor is exactly why the public loses faith and has lost faith in our judicial system. This is important, and this is why you need to know who you are voting for. I'm now going to move on to some of my judicial accomplishments. In 2017, I implemented an online program so that individuals can have their criminal convictions set aside without legal representation or cost. When I first took the bench, I thought this was important because one of the comments I would hear from defendants is, I have to hire a lawyer to represent me to get my conviction set aside. So I took on that task, and I worked with the court administrator and our IT and implemented a process to streamline and make it easy for people to have their set aside granted by a judge. During the pandemic, I served as the chief administrative judge, where I proactively launched a health awareness committee and an administrative order on safety protocols. This effort allowed the court to operate efficiently and safely during the pandemic. During this time, there was an eviction crisis in which some of the justices of the peace have not had eviction court experience. We lost our pro tems who were initially handling evictions prior to the pandemic. So I had to order immediate training during this crisis for all the judges. This was a critical time as people were losing their jobs, their homes, property owners were not receiving rent. The eviction training was necessary across the board, and also having to keep up with the Arizona Supreme Court protocols on how we handle evictions. In 2017, I organized and implemented a homeless court specialty court. I did this in collaboration with some community stakeholders. This is a divergent court so that individuals can receive long-term services such as counseling, housing, job training. Once successfully termed from the program, this actually allows them the opportunity to go on to permanent housing, long-term employment, and it's been very effective in a program that I've been very proud of. In 2019, I partnered with the Tucson Unified School District with the purpose of educating youth about misdemeanor court and facilitated mock trials with youth interested in a legal career. For a while there, it became very popular right before the pandemic because I had a lot of parents actually attending with their children during these visits to the court. I supported a robust training for new judges. In the past, the presiding judge would be the trainer of all new judges. I didn't like this method of training because I always believe people can learn from all sorts of resources and people. I wanted the experience for new judges to be expanded rather than isolated. So what I did is I suggested that all judges who were sitting in the bench teach and mentor our incoming new judges. This also allowed the opportunity for expanding on new trainings and programs that was needed for the court. And this was something that we never had in the past. So having ongoing trainings and keeping up with the laws for the court and for the judges is very important. So I'm happy to say that over the past year and a half, that's what we've been able to do. Because transparency is important to me, in 2023, I implemented a pro tem hiring process. This is a substitute judge for anyone interested in working with the courts. I formed a hiring committee and launched a process that never existed in Pima County. It was approved by the Superior Court presiding judge and the Pima County Board of Supervisors. What this allows individuals is it allows an open opportunity that is advertised. So if somebody wants to be a pro tem, you apply, the committee reviews, and it allows a fair, transparent way of hiring pro tems. As presiding judge, I manage the Tucson, Green Valley, and Ajo courts. I support and advocate for resources such as the first DUI specialty court that we now have in the Green Valley Court. In fact, this week, I'm happy to say I'll be the second judge to preside over that specialty court, in which I'm looking forward to participating in. This program, I'm happy to say, since it launched, has been tremendously successful. In fact, it started off as a pilot and has been 100% successful. In my career, I've seen a lot of programs that never seen something 100% successful. I really contribute that to the judge out in Green Valley and the staff. They've all been doing a really good job. Part of that process for people is for first-time DUI offenders. So if you're a first-time DUI offender and you're interested in taking part in this class, in this program, you have to be able to be willing to participate in extensive counseling classes. You have to be willing to submit to drug and alcohol testing. You have to be willing to show up to review hearings and meet with the judge to make sure you are complying. Once all these things come into play and that person is successful, the county attorney's office amends the DUI charge to a reckless citation. And because of that, and because of this effort, what it's done, it's really saved a lot of jobs. It's saved jobs from people who have needed to have background clearance and checks, and save jobs so people can stay in their job and not having the experience of losing a job because of a DUI. Why I am running for re-election. I think it's important for everyone to know that. Making a difference in someone's life is a tremendous responsibility. Whether you're a victim of a crime, a criminal defendant found innocent or guilty, a party to a civil hearing, or working with a defendant who is in custody. These are all life-changing experiences in a job that I take very seriously. As a justice of the peace, I am balanced and fair. I have the demeanor, diversity in my work experience, the education, the understanding of the law, and the administrative skills for this position. All these skills are relevant elements for the job as a justice of the peace. I believe the work I have done with the court and the continued innovative ideas will further enhance the court. That is why I am running for re-election. And if you live in Precinct 4, I humbly ask for your vote on July 30th. I just want to say thank you all very much. And I will touch a little bit on my endorsements so far. I have been endorsed by the Arizona National Organization for Women. I have been endorsed by former Congressman Ron Barber. I've been endorsed by Denise Baldwin, an environmentalist. I have been endorsed by Paul Eckerstrom, an attorney. I have been endorsed by Adrian Fontes, our Secretary of State in Arizona. I have been endorsed by Ruben Gallego, before a current congressman. I have been endorsed by Raul Grijalva, a congressman here. I have been endorsed by Barry Harrison, the clerk of the Superior Court. And I have been endorsed by Regina Romero, our Tucson City Mayor. I have been endorsed by Bill Reisner, an attorney here in Tucson. And I have been endorsed by Betty Villegas, our Arizona State Representative. Again, I want to thank you all. And at this time, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Pat Weedoff has a question.
Hi, Charlene. Good to
Hi,
see you.
Pat. Nice to see you.
Yes. So my question is, I listened to your extensive biography and all of the things you've been involved in over, you doesn't seem like you're that old to have been involved in all these activities, but you are. You have been involved. Not you are old, but you have been involved. So my question is, of all of your extensive activities, what has been your most rewarding accomplishment?
On a personal level, I'll say being a mother. I think that's the greatest gift for me personally. And second, for me, it's about making positive change. So when I think about some of the changes I've made even recently with the court, and it's made a difference in people's lives, like this set-aside program. One of the other things I have done is I also launched an eviction settlement conference opportunity. So when people are going through evictions, they can actually see an eviction settlement judge, and I am one of them. And this really helps. It helps reduce evictions. It gives people an opportunity to settle, and that's actually a good thing. So I would say some of the work I've most recently done with the court has been profound for me on a personal level, because sometimes, as you all know, making change can be difficult. And so I'm proud of that.
Thank you.
How do you feel that your background experience working with juveniles has impacted your perspective on the criminal justice system as a whole?
That's a very good question. I'll share with you, when I think of the most challenging job, and maybe because it was my age at the age of 21, it was working with juveniles tried as adults. I think there's a lot of work that we still have to do so that we have services for youth and for families. And I think we can make, and we start to make those decisions by looking at our services in terms of counseling and also reuniting families. That kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with where I'm at now with the Parent Student Initiative, where I serve as a board member. I've worked with students at the in the school level who have parents who are incarcerated. I also think about my experience when I was a caseworker many years ago. When I was a caseworker many years ago, I worked with a young girl who was 12 years old. And that 12-year-old girl was raped. And as a result of her rape, her parents really pushed the issue of her having that child. This young girl did not want to have the baby. She was only 12 years old. And I bring this up because this is an example of how things can spiral. As a result of this young girl being forced to have this child at the age of, this baby at the age of 12, she attempted suicide. When she had the baby, she put the baby in a garbage can. After she had the baby a year later, she got pregnant again. She attempted suicide again. And I share this because without services, or without sometimes that support or the education of what can happen to someone, and someone so young whose whole life has now changed course, is extremely profound. And I think of some of those cases of young people and some of the people I've worked with in the prison system that have got charged with a variety of cases and charges, and because they were a youth and their cases were stacking, now they're being tried as an adult. I just think that there's a better way for us to do that, and I think we still have a lot of work to do.
Bill Swan asks, when you go to work in the morning, what guides you?
I have a sticker on my bench, and that sticker says, "Would you want to be in front of you?" For me, that's a reminder. It makes me smile when I see it, but it's also a reminder because it's important work what we do on the bench, and how we speak to people, and just the whole process in the court and what happens and people's experiences when they are in the courtroom. So that's a constant reminder for me. When I'm training for a marathon, I'm running, I'm thinking about the day, and then I step on the bench and I see my note to myself, would you want to be in front of you? And that's the kickoff of my day.
You have domestic violence incidents in front of you. The danger of the perpetrator getting a gun, how do you handle that kind of issue when you're dealing with domestic violence incidents?
And that's a great question. As you know, we have a domestic violence specialty court that is divided between 2 judges. But even with that, each judge is assigned a certain amount of cases, and some of those cases are domestic violence cases. Each case is different, and to kind of give you a fuller scope on what that means with domestic violence, if someone has a gun, there's considerations of what the crime was, what the incident was. There are considerations to what the defense attorney may have, what the state prosecutor may have, and what the victim is asking. So as a judge, the judge has to consider all those factors. There's many factors that are taken into consideration. Whether someone has a gun and is acted on a gun is really something that is at the discretion of the judge. And often what I have done is ask the question. Sometimes when people are before a judge, people are nervous, people don't know how to ask or are unclear. So it's asking the question as well. But having a gun while someone is going through a domestic violence situation is something I, as a judge, do not promote or encourage. I, in fact, order them not to have a gun. And again, this is a case by case, but that's typically what I have done in my court is I make the order for them to submit their guns. When they submit their guns, then it is ordered within 24 hours for them to submit to a law enforcement agency that I direct them to.
Karen Gleason asks, what is your position on juveniles being tried as adults?
I can tell you, having the experience working with juveniles tried as adults, I did not see juveniles progress in a positive way. In facilities, once they're detained, there's sometimes education and counseling classes, of course, for youth to participate in. But the turmoil that I used to see walking, and I will share with you, walking through those gates and through the prison doors every day with working with juveniles, as juveniles were attempting suicide. Often they did not want to take part in counseling or any programs. So at that age, where a youth is still developing mentally, it is very hard to get a youth and to turn them around when they're looking at 30 years of prison. It's a very tough place to be in when you're working with them. You also see parents sometimes who have given up on these youth. And this is something, as I shared a little earlier, I think we need to get a handle on while we're seeing our youth in school right now and what we can do in terms of catching these red flags early on.
Bill Swan asks, please review again your law education and how do you keep up with the changes in the law?
My formal education in pre-law was with Prescott College. In fact, I was sharing that with someone earlier this morning. I had the privilege of working and having many instructors, professors who are attorneys and practice various types of law in town. And so one of the things I asked my attorneys is, who were the instructors at the time, please make this class as difficult as possible. And so one of the things the program involved was somewhat mirrored after the U of A law school program. And in terms of the type of law you're practicing, and whether it was administrative law, contract law, environmental law, criminal law, business law. At this time, as we all see the legislature, we have different laws and changes that are coming through. We keep up with those laws, working with our lobbyists. And once we see things coming down the pipeline that's going to affect us as a judge and the defendants that are before us, we immediately start having trainings. We talk about it. We talk about what we need to do. If it's going to be a matter of sentencing, it's going to be a matter of classes, it's going to be a matter of fines. So that way all the judges are kept in the loop and informed on any current laws and how they're changing and how it's affecting the courts.
Frank Manning asks in the chat, what's your position on coercive plea bargaining?
On pleas, when we talk about pleas and what is offered by the state, often if there is an attorney representing the defendant, the attorney will discuss the plea and what that means to the defendant. Sometimes they take a plea, sometimes they do not. Once the plea is then offered, myself as the judge, what I do is I go over the plea. But when I go over the plea, I explain what it all means and what they're going to be required to do and what are the mandates. Then I go on and I also explain their options. And I frequently do this because one of the things about pleas is it's not because you're in court and you are now cited that you have to take a plea. People need to know what their options are. So I frequently tell people on the bench, if you're not comfortable taking the plea, here are your options. And I think people really appreciate that because, again, you're going into court and maybe your first time experience, and now you have a plea offer and you're thinking you have to accept it. So I always caution people and I review the plea and I go over their options so they could make a mindful decision on their own and or with their attorney.
Ashley Velasquez would like to ask, what were the ethics allegations that you and your opponent made about each other? And will there be a trial before the election?
None for me. And I think I stated earlier, and I'll just reiterate, I can confirm, and I'll say it again, I have not violated any laws or rules or acted in any manner that would constitute any action against me as a judge by the commission.
Okay. Karen Gleason would like to ask, what is your position on gun control and red flag laws?
Well, I absolutely believe in gun control, and I hope someday that we do get there. I do also believe in the red flag law, and I'm hoping at some point that Arizona and the rest of our country can start seeing some change in that area. If I was still a state senator, I'll say I probably would have been pushing some legislation on that.
What I was wondering is the diversion programs. How many of them are there? Are they doing the work that needs to be done? What can you do to create more diversionary programs for both adults and children?
That's a great question. I like that question. Thank you for expanding on that. I can share with you currently in our court at Justice Court, we have a homeless court diversion program, which is a court that I preside over. We have a animal welfare court. We have a domestic violence court. The domestic violence court, however, I will share is not a diversion program. Okay. We have, and neither is the animal welfare court. I'm just kind of going over our specialty courts. We do have a veterans program that is shared, and we work in conjunction with the city court that is a diversion program. So right now, if I look at our current programs and what we have in terms of specialty courts, we currently only have two programs, and that would be the homeless court program and the veterans program. I mentioned earlier, and I talked a little bit about the Green Valley Court and their DUI program. That's really not considered a diversion program. It is a specialty program because as a result of someone participating in that program, they can get their charge amended. At this time, when I look at some of those specialty courts and some of the needs and what we have in our court, one of the upcoming things that I would like to see happen is for us to have a behavioral health court. We had a certain style of managing that court for a number of years by one judge, and then another judge took over temporarily. But right now we're in the process of looking at how to revamp that and what that means for people that do have a mental illness, and how that's going to look in terms of a divergent option for folks.
How do you find out what precinct you live in as far as the justice of the peace?
Yes, and thank you for that. So actually, if you, there's one way you can go on to the Division of Elections is one, the Pima County Consolidated Court. There's maps on all the areas and that identifies where that judge is, where that judge may be and may be representing. So there's maps. So there's a couple of ways, and the recorder's office as well.
Hey everybody, it's Senator Mark Kelly. As all of you know, Arizona Democrats have had a lot of important wins over the last few years. We won 2 U.S. Senate races, and we delivered Arizona's electoral votes to President Biden and Vice President Harris. We elected Governor Katie Hobbs, Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, and Attorney General Chris Mays. Now, those elections were close, and our victories mattered. Arizona Democrats from the federal to the local level have delivered real results for our state on critical issues like combating climate change, lowering prescription drug costs, protecting the right to vote, and preventing more restrictions on abortion access. The Democrats of Greater Tucson offers the opportunity to hear from elected officials and candidates about that important work and the issues that matter to them. That information will be invaluable as Arizonans head to the polls. So this election cycle, whether you're signing up to knock doors, make phone calls, or joining the Democrats of Greater Tucson to hear from and speak to Democrats in our area, please know that your voice matters, and we need you on this team. Thank you.